All right, guys, with the conclusion of the 2023 NFL draft, we can finally start assigning real, tangible fantasy values to the 2023 NFL draft class. This is one of the wilder drafts in recent memory, just based on the fact that this is the most trades that happened over that 3-day span in any draft ever. So there's been quite a bit of shakeup to our pre-draft and post-draft rankings. So stick around and see what we think about them. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football, and today we'll be kicking off our post-draft ranking series of our fantasy relevant positions of the 2023 NFL draft class. Just like we did before the draft, we broke down wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, and running backs. Broken down 1 to 10, who I'm valuing, who I'm looking for, who I think is overvalued. We're going to do the same thing now that landing spots and draft capital have been assigned to all of these players. So just like as we started off with the pre-draft rankings, we're going to start off with my favorite and most impactful group, which is going to be the wide receiver class, one that was hyped up a year ago, maybe fell off the radar a little bit, but I think there's going to be quite a bit of value in the 2023 draft class for fantasy. So let's break into my number one wide receiver. And I'm going to start with a spicy take. My number one wide receiver that you should be targeting is going to be Jordan Addison. He went to the Minnesota Vikings at the 23rd pick overall. In my pre-draft rankings, he was wide receiver number 2, but now he moves up to my wide receiver number 1. And why is that? Well, it's because I think Jordan Addison went to the best landing spot. I mean, in our pre-draft rankings, we assumed that all of our players went to the Minnesota Vikings to play across from Justin Jefferson, and I don't necessarily think being a wide receiver 2 in that offense is a bad thing. Justin Jefferson is the most dominant wide receiver in NFL at the current moment. It would be hard-pressed for me to put any single wide receiver currently better than him, so he's going to draw a lot of coverage, a lot of double coverage, opening up a lot of receiving options for the wide receiver 2 in this offense. Also, just as far as comparing him to the other wide receivers in this draft class, there's not really much opportunity for a quick rise to that wide receiver 1 spot. Maybe there's 1 or 2 guys that can become a wide receiver 1 later on, but Jordan Addison is going to immediately slot into that number 2 wide receiver spot in Minnesota and is going to have the most immediate production out of any of these wide receiver draft class, out of this wide receiver draft class. Maybe that does skew my opinion on him a little bit, because I think compared to Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's the wide receiver 3 for Seahawks, Quentin Johnson, who's slated to be the wide receiver 3 for the Chargers this year. The fact that he has immediate production, again, skews it a little bit, but I don't think it's going to hamper him, and I think it's going to be long, consistent, year-over-year production for Jordan Addison. Also, this is an offense under Kevin O'Connell that's really shifting towards the pass game. Dalvin Cook's getting over. There's been rumors of them getting off of Dalvin Cook. They did not invest high draft capital in a running back, so I think the receiving game is a huge focus of the Minnesota offense, and Jordan Addison will be very much involved there. So, number 2 wide receiver, because he was number 1, Jackson Smith-Njigba does come in at number 2. And this is not to say anything about the talent of Jackson Smith-Njigba. Certainly the most talented wide receiver in this draft class. I just think the landing spot really does handicap him for value. He's coming into a spot where, year 1, he's going to be the wide receiver 3 behind Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. And they might move on from Tyler Lockett after this year. And that would mean he steps up into that wide receiver 2 position. But again, I don't think his ceiling is really that much higher than a Jordan Addison at this current point in time. Also, when you look at the scheme, the Seahawks did invest a very, very high capital, a second-round pick into Zach Charbonnet, the third best running back in this class, after investing a second-round pick into Kenneth Walker last year. And at the press conference after the draft, Pete Carroll was asked about if he's going to change and favor more 3 wide receiver sets now that they drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba, and he said, no, we're not changing our scheme whatsoever, which, I mean, it's coach speak. I know it's not entirely, he could be lying to our faces, but just how much of capital they've drafted into the run game and how much Pete Carroll loves to establish the run, I just don't see a massive target share for Jackson Smith-Njigba. Down the line, obviously he could develop into a very top tier fantasy asset. Just right now, I don't think the immediate production is going to be there for him. All right, number 3 is going to be Quentin Johnston. I believe this is the only wide receiver that actually maintained the same position pre-draft and post-draft rankings. He was taken number 21 overall to the Los Angeles Chargers. And again, this is a guy where I think he maintained his value because he went to probably the perfect landing spot for him. Very similar to, I think this is like where you take maybe the best parts of Jordan Addison, the best parts of Jackson Smith-Njigba, and put them together, and that's the situation you get Quentin Johnston is. They didn't invest high draft capital in a running back. The Chargers did not. So, this is an offense that also brought in the old Boise State, Kellen Moore from the Cowboys, who is very pass-centric. So I believe with Justin Herbert as a quarterback, there's going to be a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. He will slot in as that 3rd wide receiver and get a ton of opportunity there. Obviously, he's not going to slot in immediately for the production that Addison will get, but he can definitely grow into a much, much larger role in this offense. Also, did not address running back position whatsoever. There's been a ton of rumors about Austin Eckler potentially moving on this offseason or next offseason. So, maybe they bring him back on a 1-year deal. Maybe they franchise tag him or get him to play for 1 year, but just does not seem like there's a heavy emphasis on the run game, which means Quentin Johnston should find suitable target production in this offense. And then obviously down the line, we have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, both who were absolutely mauled by injuries last year. So when that comes to fruition, more likely than not, he can definitely step up into that wide receiver 2 role. The reason why I have him here at the 3rd spot, again, just the talent. He's just way less talented than a Jordan Addison or Jackson Smith-Njigba. And if you want to hear my thoughts about these guys' talent levels, go into the pre-draft rankings. I really dive into their height, weight, ball skills, where they excel, where they don't excel, what skills about them make me excited or make me very trepidatious around them. So yeah, even though Quentin Johnston goes to an amazing landing spot, the skill level is what keeps him here at 3rd for me. Moving on to our 4th wide receiver, it's going to be Zay Flowers. A guy that definitely moved up in my rankings based purely on draft capital alone. He goes number 22 overall to the Baltimore Ravens, and he was my wide receiver 6 in pre-draft rankings. He was very, very low in my pre-draft just because I had a ton of concerns around his height and weight. Again, we talk about outliers in this class, 5'9" receivers, only been 7 since the year 2000 that have gone for 1,000 yards or more. There's only been 7 seasons by a 5'9" wide receiver of 1,000 yards or more since 2000. 6 of those belong to Steve Smith Sr., and the other one belongs to Marquise Brown. So betting on a 5'9" wide receiver to be an elite fantasy prospect is quite the outlier. However, I'm not making the mistake that I made last year. I will fully admit I made a mistake letting Jahan Dotson fall out of the 1st round last year. You have to really, value the 1st round capital that these players get. And Zay Flowers is the last one here, and I'm not putting a 2nd round capital wide receiver over Zay Flowers. I know there's been a lot of hype around a Jonathan Mingo or a Rashee Rice because he gets the Kansas City bump. I will never take them over Zay Flowers. That 1st round draft capital is so important for fantasy value. Also, he's going to, I think, a decent situation. Zay Flowers can be, a possession-based receiver, especially if you play in half PPR or PPR formats. Zay Flowers might get a ton of volume. He could be, one of the more target-heavy weapons in this offense. They signed Lamar Jackson, so they have the quarterback situation under control. That's good. They brought in OBJ on a 1-year contract. However, he's old, hasn't really had the production he had when he was back in the Giants. They can move on from him next year. Rashad Bateman really is more that deep threat. So as far as a guy that's going to provide consistency to that offense, I would slot in Zay Flowers for that production currently. And Lamar has said under new offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who is known for his air raid style offense, that he wants to air out the ball and throw for 6,000 yards. Zay would definitely be a beneficiary of that. All right, moving on. Number 5 here on my wide receiver rankings is going to be Jonathan Mingo, a guy that, again, skyrocketed up my rankings because of his draft capital. He was taken with the 8th pick of the 2nd round, which was 39th overall. Previously on my pre-draft rankings, he was completely unranked, and that's just basically because he had no production in college. We talked about how, fantasy points in college really translates to fantasy production in the NFL, and he just did not have that production that I would feel comfortable with, and I did not think he was going to get this draft capital. However, I was wrong. He got the 5th wide receiver off the board, and he got high 2nd round draft capital, which is very, very valuable for a wide receiver, and he goes to a spot in the Carolina Panthers that I think he can excel, and I think he can step up and be the wide receiver 1. I don't want to say eventually because I think, he's not a true X receiver. Yeah, he's 6'2", 225 pounds, has that prototypical height, but I think wide receiver, they'll move on from Terrace Marshall, they'll move on from Adam Thielen, and they'll continue to address wide receiver going forward. Obviously, the Panthers brought in Bryce Young. with the first overall pick in the draft. So what I'm saying is I don't know how Jonathan Mingo's long-term future is going to shake out, but I think he could be incredibly productive for fantasy this year and still be like a fringe wide receiver, 2 receiver going after that. I do like to believe in some of the storylines. He was brought in the same year as Bryce Young. He's going to develop that rapport with that quarterback in rookie camp and mini camp and OTAs. So I'm going to believe in kind of the rapport that he developed with Bryce Young. I'm going to believe in the talent of Bryce Young and how well he has been at Alabama and how excellent he made his receivers and John Mechie and Jameson Williams look 2 years ago. I think he can do the same thing for Jonathan Mingo. So really giving him the Bryce Young bump, giving him the draft capital bump, and I would definitely be taking a shot on this guy early in the second round like he did go in this rookie startup draft. Number 6 is still going to be a guy that I just can't seem to quit, and it's going to be Jalin Hyatt. He was my pre-draft wide receiver 4 in my pre-draft rankings. He drops down to wide receiver 6 here, and he was taken in the 3rd round by the New York Giants. And you'd be yelling at me, what are you doing? How are you putting this 3rd round wide receiver over so many 2nd round wide receivers like Rashee Rice, like Jordan Reed, like Marvin Mims, who's taken by the Broncos? I just can't seem to quit this guy. There's a certain thing about production in the college game that I think just translates so well to the NFL, and I think that I would not be as high on him if he didn't go to this landing spot. I think the New York Giants is the perfect landing spot to develop some guy that has raw speed, raw separation skills, but needs to develop. Now, also in the Giants, you're looking at a wide receiver room that is barren outside of a plethora of slot position guys. You have Darius Slayton, you have Isaiah Hodges, you have Wan'Dale Robinson. These guys are all short slot guys. You need some guy to line up on the outside, and I know Jalin Hyatt line up mostly in the slot, but I think Brian Daboll has big plans for Jalin Hyatt. You have to remember, Brian Daboll came from an offense that traded from Stephon Diggs, who compares, in my opinion, very similarly to Jalin Hyatt. Stephon Diggs was 5'11", 192 coming out of college. Jalin Hyatt was obviously 6', 185, so comparable body size. Stephon Diggs, he had very similar concerns where, he had great separation. He was very great separation and great speed. However, there were a ton of concerns around his route running. It seemed like his routes were lazy, curved off, didn't finish follow-through routes, and obviously attacking the catch point. This aligns very similarly with what Jalin Hyatt does. And so I'm of the mantra that Jalin Hyatt could be Brian Daboll's Stephon Diggs. And I think I'm taking a shot on him at the end of the 2nd round. I mean, even midway through the 2nd round, I don't think any other these wide receivers has the upside that Jalin Hyatt potentially does in an offense that you can tell last year was immensely elevated by Brian Daboll's presence. So yeah, I mean, we know the hit rate of wide receivers in the 2nd round is about 30%. So why go for a safe pick when you're going to go for a wide receiver 3? If you can go for Jalin Hyatt, who has that upside to become the wide receiver 1 for the New York Giants, I'm all in on it. I can't quit Jalin Hyatt. That's for sure. Let's see. Wide receiver number 7 for me is going to be Rashee Rice. Again, he gets the Kansas City bump. That's really why he's here. In my pre-draft rankings, he was wide receiver 9, so he moves up 2 spots for me, but I'm not really willing to catapult him into that top 5. He was taken in the 2nd round, so he gets that 2nd round draft capital, number 55 overall. It was the 24th pick in the 2nd round. Just getting all that information out there. And there's a lot of, good storylines to have confidence in Rashee. Again, he went and practiced with Patrick Mahomes prior to the draft. Patrick stuck his neck out for him and said, hey, listen, this is the guy I want to draft. But, this is the Kansas City Chiefs. It's an offense that uses a gajillion skill players. I put out a tweet last year that said Patrick Mahomes will throw for over 4,500 yards, but not a single wide receiver will get over 600 yards. And in theory, that was kind of true. Juju Smith-Schuster got about 800 yards, but every single other wide receiver, we're talking Sky Moore, we're talking Kadarius Toney, we're talking Mecole Hardman and MVS, they're all well under 600 yards. It's just, all of these, all the offenses spread out quite a bit with so many weapons that they have on their offense. Also, there's been a lot of preseason hype. Not that I buy into the Jordan Ross or the Justin Ross thing, but, He has been practicing. He seems like he is going to play for the Kansas City Chiefs this year. Andy Reid has been pretty excited about him. And obviously the main pass catching weapon is going to be Travis Kelce. That's not changing anytime soon. So I just think he comes into a crowded room. I think it's going to take a while for him to actually develop. There's not really... Kansas City is not a team where you come in and you experience immediate production. The rookies don't get catapulted quite a bit. They don't get catapulted in the office quite as bit as people think they did. I mean, just look at Sky Moore. Last year, he was taken one pick, I think. He was taken one pick ahead, I think at 54. And look what happened to him. He had basically minimal production. He's basically dead to Dynasty players at this point. But, he's still kicking around. So I don't think people are going to expect Rashee Rice to come in and have immediate production when it comes to Kansas City, and I think that's kind of a little misnomer. People think about, it's just such an explosive offense. He'll get production. I'm very trepidatious. I think Rashee Rice at the middle of the second is quite the overpay as it stands. Number 8 is going to be Jayden Reed. Again, another wide receiver that jumped up into my top 10 rankings based on draft capital alone. He was unranked in my pre-draft rankings, but he goes in the second round, 90th pick of the second round, number 50 overall to the Green Bay Packers. I think this is an offense that has a ton of questions. We've seen sparks of brilliance from Jordan Love, but again, we don't know if he can put it together for a whole season. We don't know how prolific he will be as a passer, how much, even the Green Bay Packers themselves, they got extra draft capital next year in case they have to move up and select a Drake May or a Caleb Williams or a Bo Nix or one of these guys to come in and be the next quarterback. So we don't really know what the offensive outlook for the Green Bay Packers is. They brought in Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson last year. I think Jayden Reed is a good complement to both those guys. I just don't think that he's ever going to be the wide receiver one. I think this is a position that, Green Bay will continue to address draft after draft in the second round. And I think next year they might be targeting kind of maybe a Romeo Dunze or one of those bigger wide receivers that fall into the second round. So Jayden Reed, I like his situation. I like the moxie that he plays with. It's just I don't have enough confidence in the Green Bay Packers offense for him to be slotted in as a second round pick. And I don't have enough confidence in Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs and Lucas Musgraves and Tucker Kraft and all these other guys that are coming into the offense that he's going to get a target share that's worthy enough for the fantasy position that he has. I think he could be a guy like an Alec Pierce where they say, he could come in and then, the quarterback play isn't good. They rely on the running backs. They get tight ends involved, and he's left with pretty measly scraps as far as fantasy production. Moving on to the wide receiver 9. This is going to be Marvin Mims, the Oklahoma wide receiver who gets drafted with the very last pick of the second round by the Denver Broncos. That would be pick 63 overall, 32nd pick of the second round. In my pre-draft rankings, he was wide receiver 8, so he moves down just a little bit. And I'll say there's been a lot of trade rumors about Courtland Sutton, about Jerry Jeudy. And listen, if they move off of one of those guys, Marvin Mims goes skyrocketing. He probably goes up to wide receiver 7 ahead of Rashee Rice, potentially even ahead of Jalen Hyatt. But right now, if he's below Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, I just don't see it. Again, I don't believe in Russell Wilson. I was fading him prior to last season. We saw how up and down. He started off the season really, really poorly last year. Now, that could have been a Nathaniel Hackett issue. Maybe Sean Payton comes in and absolutely revolutionizes the offense. Maybe he brings back the old Russell Wilson, lets him cook again, and maybe, he has tons of air yards. But right now, I'm not a huge believer in the Denver Broncos offense. I don't think, the Sean Payton bump is going to be enough to make them prolific again, especially not with Marvin Mims being the third wide receiver, potentially maybe even lower down on the depth chart as he comes in. I know they just gave out a massive contract extension to Tim Patrick, so he's going to be there for a while. Definitely they have him as part of their plans. So Marvin Mims, for right now, I don't want to get too much into it because as long as he's a wide receiver 4 in the depth chart, I don't really want to take the risk on it. If they do move off of a Courtland Sutton, then I'm definitely happy to throw Marvin Mims way higher on the rankings. Finally, well, spoiler alert, I'm going to give you some honorable mentions after this, so not finally, but my number 10 wide receiver in my post-draft rankings is going to be Cedric Tillman. He moves down quite a bit in my rankings because he fell in the real draft. I thought he was gonna be a second round talent. Doesn't really land there. He goes with 11th overall pick in the third round, pick number 74 overall to the Cleveland Browns. So yeah, again, the draft capital wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be for him, which is part of why he falls to number 10 on my list. Also, same way I talked about Jaden Reed, the same way I've talked about Marvin Mims, I just don't believe in the offensive situation that he's put in. Deshaun Watson looked like a shell of his former self after taking a year and a half off when he returned to the field last year. I'm going to need to see it before I believe it from Deshaun Watson. Maybe with, the practice he had with the last 5 games last year. Maybe he comes into training camp, really applies himself. Maybe he comes back. And then he could potentially come in and, lead a passing offense that's going to throw for more than 4,000 air yards and have multiple 1,000-yard receivers in Amari Cooper and Cedric Tillman. I do think Cedric Tillman is talented enough to come in and step in as the wide receiver 2 next to Cooper. So I think his upside is probably a little bit higher than Marvin Mims or Jaden Reed. But there's just so many questions around the Cleveland Browns organizationally that I can't get really too excited about Cedric Tillman. If he does fall to the middle of the third round, I'm definitely willing to take a shot on him there. But second round is pretty rich for my blood with Cedric Tillman. So let's go into some honorable mentions. The guy that falls at number 11 is Josh Downs, and I only really want to talk about him because I think he's a landmine for where he's going. Obviously, in this mock, he goes at the 204, and that is way too high for Josh Downs. Listen, I love Anthony Richardson as a fantasy prospect. I'm not entirely sure what he's going to develop into as an actual NFL prospect. His rushing ability is why he's my quarterback 1. His throwing ability leaves a lot to be desired. He had one of the the lowest accuracy rates in college football last year, and people watching the tape, I mean, his highlights are incredible, but if you go watch the full game, it was incredible highlight and then 2 throws that were just completely errant. And Josh Downs, as a speedster, as a guy who's 5'8", as a guy who's really going to be looking to take the top off of defenses, I don't really see him really getting too many targets. I mean, he'll be kind of the Josh Palmer or the DeAndre Carter of the Los Angeles Chargers last year. That's a great comp that I have for Josh Downs because he might have 1 or 2 games where he pops off and catches 2 long touchdowns, but he might spend other games getting 1 to 2 targets. And mostly he's going to be just running go routes to take the top off the defense. So it's going to be more running lanes for both Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. So I think he's definitely a landmine to avoid in the second round. Other guys that I really like as like UDFAs, Xavier Hutchinson, big-bodied wide receiver. Big-bodied wide receiver out of Iowa State, prototypical height in a class didn't have a lot of height. 6'2", goes to a very wide receiver needy team in the Texans. Tank Dell, I know they took him in the third round, but I like Xavier Hutchinson as a prospect better. Michael Wilson, I liked him a little bit more before DeAndre Hopkins said he was going to stay. I think he could replace DeAndre Hopkins if they do end up moving off DeAndre Hopkins this year. Obviously, he won't be a very good prospect, but a guy maybe you can be trading for like with a 4th or 5th round pick next year. A guy that as soon as Hopkins is off the team, I think, and as long as Wilson can stay healthy, a guy I'd look to invest in as well. Parker Washington is also a guy. Parker Washington's also a guy that I think is really good. I don't like his landing spot in the Jacksonville Jaguars. However, he does have a lot of those traits that I'd like to see. Out of Penn State, a really good catcher of the ball, really soft hands, he's like a mini Jahan Dotson to me. Tank Dell, I'm only taking the shot on him because CJ Stroud told the Texans once he got drafted, hey, go out and get Tank Dell. I really like Tank Dell. So, same way we talked about Jonathan Mingo with the Carolina Panthers, that rookie bonding experience. Well, maybe there's that rookie bonding experience between CJ Stroud and Tank Dell. Kayshon Boutte, name value alone, he goes to the Patriots. Not that they're really well known for developing wide receiver talent in the slightest, but maybe he goes to a structure where, Bill Belichick whips him into shape. He kind of rediscovers that player that was there in 2020 when he had this SEC single game receiving record, when he put up over 1,000 yards. Maybe he comes back. Maybe he's a little bit more viable. Maybe he's the receiving help that Mac Jones wants. I don't think I'm taking him in the third round, maybe a 4th round shot. And finally, A.T. Perry, just with the injury history of with the injury history of Michael Thomas, I think A.T. Perry is a guy that, can come in, maybe will slot in if Thomas continues to be injured. He could be the number 2 behind Chris Olave. Chris Olave is more of a short speed guy. A.T. Perry is more of that large, big-bodied, win at the catch point type of guy. I think he was a much better wide receiver than his draft value indicated in the 6th round, and I think he actually could be pretty crucial to this Saints offense. So that's going to wrap it up for you guys. My thoughts on the wide receiver rankings post-draft. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully gave you some food for thought in your rookie drafts coming up. And we'll be sure to touch on quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends here in the next few days. Take care, guys.